Spirit, draw near, gathered here in one strong body, Spirit, draw near. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Gathered here in the mystery of the hour.
Beautiful. Gathered here in the mystery. We don't greet each other. We say, how are you doing? We don't say like, we're gathered in a mystery. We're walking through a mystery. But when you think about it that way, it does kind of, I don't know about you, but it kind of hit me hearing you sing that, Rick, that we're gathered here in a mystery. Somebody said, in order to know a person, you need to know their origin story. You think about the superheroes, Marvel superheroes, and they all have an origin story. How did Superman become Superman? How did Spider-Man become Spider-Man? We all have these origin stories. If you think about Christmas is like the church's origin story for Jesus. And Genesis, the book of Genesis in the Bible is the Jewish origin story. Where do we come from? Now, evolution, though, is the cosmos's origin story. And origin stories tell about a series of events that shaped who a person is. It's the key moments and often traumas that form us into who we are. We all have an origin story. And we often know each other better if we know something about the origin story of who we're with. To quote a very well-known Bible verse, we are stardust, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. Actually, that's not a Bible. That's right. That's Joni Mitchell. That's a Joni Mitchell song. Thank you. I'm glad you were here to remind me. But I've always liked that song because, it combines we are stardust, the evolutionary idea of how we got here, with, you're so smart, Linda. I'm glad to know that you listen to. Some people know it as a Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song too. But it combines this evolutionary idea of we are stardust with, I think what it's referring to is that Bible idea of to get us back to the Garden of Eden from the Genesis origin story from the Bible. I still have to remind myself sometimes that we are among the very first people to know, to have actual data and information about the vastness of the universe. Most of the generations that came before us had no idea what we know and what we can see. With the invention of space telescopes and the advances in astronomy, the old religious stories no longer make sense as literal descriptions of history or how we got here, how the world came into existence. Now, we could still glean a lot of wisdom and psychological sustenance and cultural mores from these stories. There's so much in them. But we now have empirical data that shows us that the ancient religious stories are not history. They're not astronomy. They can be astrology sometimes. Humanity, in a sense, is between stories. We're between the old stories that people used to make sense of their lives, and then some new story that we're starting to learn about who we are and how we got here. And then how do we make sense of that? If this isn't how we got here and why we're here, and this is how we got here and why we're here, then how we got here, then why are we here? And what are we doing, and what are we supposed to do with our lives? Now, a lot of people still cling to these religious stories as if they're history, as if they're literal. But it seems that more and more people every year are starting to realize that the religious stories, they're cultural tales rather than factual ones. And as humans, we need stories to understand who we are and what we're supposed to be doing. It seems like all other animals, all other creatures seem to know what they're supposed to be doing. But we need stories to help us figure it out for whatever reason. That may be the subject of another message someday about why we need to do that. But it's like the other animals have it programmed in their DNA. If a tornado or a forest fire comes, all the other animals run away. We're like, oh man, some of us are like, wow, what is that? We go towards a tornado, especially here in Oklahoma. It's like all other creatures seem to know. But throughout time, there have been a lot of creation stories because peoples have needed to understand their world. Do you know there were over 100 creation stories here in North America among the indigenous people before Europeans and others came? And then since so many people from all over the world have come, there's now thousands of creation stories coming from hundreds of lands and cultures from all over the world. Of course, each story uses the flora and the fauna of the place where they are to try to describe what the world's like. So in North American creation stories, you'll find buffalo and rabbits and deer. In Middle Eastern creation stories, you'll find sheep and shepherds and pharaohs and olive trees. In Asian creation stories, you'll find elephants and monkeys and lotus flowers. Because people used what they know in order to try to understand what they don't know or didn't know. Now, this has led to a lot of clash of cultures where one's like, well, we got the right story. You're telling a different story. You're leading people astray. And people have fought and killed each other over these stories. The Christian missionary who went to India marveled in disbelief that these people have gods with an elephant head, and it looked like a monkey. While the Indians were wondering to themselves, scratching their heads, wondering why Europeans worship a god as a bloody dead person nailed to a tree. Nevertheless, we all have a strong need to understand. And as the song says, where do we come from? Who are we? What are we? Where are we going? What are we supposed to be doing? And because you and I are alive now, you and I know that we're stardust. That the atoms that make up our bodies come from exploding stars. We know that all the hydrogen that exists in the world was created over 13 billion years ago. Our bodies are over 70% H2O, hydrogen and oxygen, meaning that a large percentage of the atoms in our bodies are 13 billion years old. You might have felt old before you came in this morning. We know that the carbon and all the oxygen that's around us and in us was formed from exploding red giant stars. We're made of star stuff. Now these images, have you seen these images from the new James Webb telescope? They're family photos. These are our ancestors. As my colleague Forrest Church liked to say, the world was pregnant with us from the moment it all began. All the raw material that existed in that first moment of creation, and it's been forming and reforming and growing and expanding over billions of years. The hydrogen in your body, in my body, was once in, some of the atoms were once in dinosaurs 100 million years ago. Just think about that. And who knows what other amazing creatures and phenomenon these atoms once lived in and created and made possible. But in this moment, these atoms have come together in this unique way to make you and to make me. As my colleague Reverend Michael Dowd says, you and I are not separate from the universe. We are an expression of the universe. Dowd explains that when the first man floated above earth and looked down upon the earth, it was not man looking at earth. It was the first time earth became complex enough to be able to push a piece of itself far enough away to be able to look back on itself. We are earth looking in the mirror. We are creation that has finally become conscious of itself after billions of years. The cosmologist and author Brian Swimme says 4 billion years ago, the earth was molten rock. And now it sings opera and hip hop and jazz and gospel and all that stuff. With everything we know now, and realizing that we are among the first to know it, the first few generations to know this stuff, it makes sense that people are looking for new ways and new stories to create communities of values around. Communities that honor the knowledge that we have and the advancements of science and culture. Now, I've read a lot of creation stories, but I think the most amazing and awesome of them all is creation or evolution. That story is as miraculous, as magical, as mysterious and mystical as any other. And when you think about it, it has the potential to be a unifying story for our entire globe, our entire world. In the old idea, the various religions competed and fought with each other because they felt that their story was true, and so everyone else's had to be false and wrong and misleading. But with this new understanding, every creation story can have great cultural value without any one of them having to be right. And then the others, of course, being all wrong. In that way, evolution gives us a universal origin story. One thing that's nice about evolution is that it, unlike many of the creation stories that are out there from religions, the scientific creation story changes as we discover new things in the world. You know, when we find a fossil or a new discovery in the sky, the story adapts to include it. The problem with believing in various religious creation stories as fact is that when science discovers things like dinosaurs, or like that the earth revolves around the sun, or like the fact that life is not 1,000, but thousands, but billions of years old, religions feel threatened, whereas science feels enlightened. The evolutionary story is one that's not over that we need to learn. It's one that's continuing to emerge, that we are a part of. It's a great story, not something that happened, but something that's happening. The great creation story called evolution is still being told, and we're a part of it, and it transcends and it encompasses all the different cultural and religious creation stories. This story was not given to one people in one country, in one language, in one time, and told to spread it all over the world. It's truly the story of all humanity that can be seen and verified from wherever you live on the planet. And it includes not just people, but animals and plants and all life as one creation. And the more we learn, the more amazing it is. For example, we know that when we look up at the North Star in the night sky, that it could have burned out in the 14th century, and information of that happening has not yet arrived. Because it takes that long at the speed of light for us to see it. We know now that the closest star that we can see with our naked eye, Alpha Centauri, when it reaches our eye, it left 4 years before at the speed of light. It could be out 3 years ago and we're still seeing it. And then that's the closest star. But the farthest ones that we can see with the naked eye began their journey more than 1 million years ago. They could have gone out a long time ago. We just don't know it. When we consider the incredible vastness of the universe and how much time, it really puts into perspective our little bodies and lives and the short time that we have. And it's kind of an ego destroying kind of a thing, you know. The ego, it's hard for the ego to walk around being like, well, I know how this all works and why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing because I'm so smart, I understand everything. You realize that we are like a tiny speck of dust on a small little blue bead circling around in infinite space, arguing with one another over whose story is the right story. And we're going to kill, and sometimes killing each other over it. It's ridiculous. And evolution helps us remember. There are, it says, millions of stars, and our sun is a small one, millions of stars for every one person on earth. There's like 9 billion people on earth, times millions of stars each. This is enormous world that we live in, cosmos. What I find most amazing about the story is that it doesn't tell of one chosen people or one people who are saved and everyone else is not. It's everybody's story. We're all included, not just us, but the animals and the plants and everything. And even the question of God isn't denied or proven. So there's room for atheists and agnostics and believers of different kinds to all embrace the story. Mystics and skeptics. Now, the fear that I hear from religious fundamentalists, and I hear it because, being a Unitarian Universalist minister, I get into these conversations, and folks are afraid. They think I'm sending people to hell because I'm not teaching the true Word of God. But there's some, they think that if people don't believe in God, they're just going to become immoral and violent and unjust. But, there's some cognitive dissonance in this perspective. Because many of these religions have been around for centuries. Then despite people's belief in God, and often because of it, we have seen a lot of violence and domination and injustice and oppression. So belief in God or in religion has certainly not rid the world of violence and injustice. The question for today is whether there are ways that the story of evolution can help to inspire people to live more peaceful, moral, and equitable lives. Is it a story that's big enough and provides enough information for us to actually base our lives on? And our morality and our ethics. I can think of 3 ways that an evolutionary view can lead us to a more just and peaceful world. First, with evolution, we understand ourselves as a part of the whole of existence. We're not separate. We're not supposed to dominate. It's not here for us. We're a part of it. We can't deny our utter interconnectedness and interdependence with everything and everyone. We are truly related to one another and to all that exists, and that's reason to respect and to care for one another and the environment. It could be said, if it could speak, the gospel of evolution would say, love thy neighbor as thyself, because thy neighbor is thyself. And you're also one with the planet and the plants and the animals. And so care for them as you would want to be cared for too. As human beings, well, a second thing, the interconnectedness, the interdependence, the sense of oneness, right? That's part of the evolutionary story. And then a second one is the idea that we are co-creators. As human beings, we can help to create governments, buildings, bridges, the internet, poetry, culture, churches, as well as gas chambers, weapons of mass destruction, implements of torture, cluster bombs, and mass graves. We have the power to create things that support life and dignity and things that destroy life and demean others' dignity. It's an incredible responsibility. We're not just participants in a world created by others. We co-create the world we live in. So the gospel of evolution, if you will, doesn't claim that someone else is in charge, is going to come down and fix everything, or has created a perfect system that is going to take care of itself. It's up to us to care for the planet and for one another. People used to identify with protecting just their family. I'm first and foremost my family. And then it became my clan, the clan. And then eventually the tribe. It's my tribe versus their tribe. We protect our tribe. Eventually the nation state that we have now, like we're going to protect our nation. We have a big army and make sure that we take care of our own. We're Americans, whatever it is. But in the evolutionary story, we identify with protecting the safety and the protection of the entire planet. People in other countries, plants and animals, here and in other countries. It's an incredible advancement in our understanding of inclusion and what is a neighbor and what is family. So evolution takes us to a whole new level. This evolutionary thinking takes to a whole new level of inclusiveness. Now, it can feel overwhelming when we realize that it matters what we buy, what we do, how we act, who we vote for. But it does. And the story tells us that. And a third part of the story of evolution, or this evolutionary mindset, if we're going to use this as a story that can help guide our lives and understand ourselves and what we're supposed to be doing in it, is that the story is a story of cooperation, increasing cooperation. The way that exploding stars turned into rose bushes and giraffes and pomegranates and people who love and who learn is the story of increasing cooperation. At each stage of development, those parts of existence that learned how to cooperate with others in a more and more complex structure survived. Imagine there was a time when there was just an existing single cell, there were just single cell organisms. There was a point at which it was all just single cell organisms. But then there was some change in the temperature or some crisis in the climate, and certain single cell organisms bonded together with others, teamed up with some other single cell organisms, and the ones who figured that out survived. And then they stayed alive. And then that happened over and over and over again, over billions of years. And these more complex combinations and cooperation, and it led to those who survived were the ones who could adapt to whatever change was happening. And the thing is that this isn't just a story. Evolution tells us that that's the way life works. Those who cooperate survive, and those who don't die out. And so when you think about this, we don't just have like 1,000 years of data or 6,000 years of data. We don't just have 1,000,000 years of data. We have billions of years of data telling us that those organisms that learn to cooperate in more complex structures survive. That's the kind of story we're living in, and where we came from and how it can help us to survive. So despite the fears of the fundamentalists that believing in evolution will destroy religion and our planet, it might actually save religion and help people see that religion has a purpose within culture, within society, within people's lives. It's just purpose is just not to teach us about facts and truth. It can help us learn religions can help us learn how to care for one another. So can evolution teach us and inspire us to care for our earth, to be co-creators, to take responsibility for one another and for the whole planet. It encourages us to work together for greater and greater cooperation as a means of survival, because the story has consistently told us that that's what we need to be doing. What it means is that we need to develop some new ways of being human, new ways of creating community, new ways of being a society. And this requires creativity. 20,000 species a year are dying out right now on the planet Earth. Now, it was normal. There would be extinctions. Like what I read was that there'd be 5, maybe 10 different species would disappear a year. That happens as part of evolution. But we're right now in a mass extinction time. 20,000 species on average a year. So we haven't seen a mass extinction like this for 65,000 years since the dinosaurs went extinct. Now, we know we can create iPhones and spaceships and football stadiums with roofs that, come close and open up. But it's time for us to create new ways of being in human community together that are based in what we know and that bring us together as a world to cooperate. And that's what we're doing here in our own way, in a post-pandemic, scientific, culturally diverse world. We're creating new stories, new ways of being community, new ways of being together, and learning how to love beyond belief. So welcome and thank you. Amen.